WiSP Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello and welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of the WiSP Sports Desk with me, Chris Stafford, and I'm joined by Nancy Gillen. Nancy, welcome. How about this? Brand new show.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you join us because there is so much news that's happening in the world of women's sports, like just minute by minute, isn't it? And you break a lot of it, of course, on the website Inside the Game. So you really do keep your finger on the pulse of it all, don't you?
Yeah, we cover kind of everything that happens around the world. So yeah, not much gets under our radar.
No, it doesn't. All right. Well, let's kick off by you introducing what topics we're going to cover today. So if you want to run down what those are, and then we'll get started.
Yep. Well, I think it'd be quite interesting to have a look at the Brianna Williams case because she's failed a doping test. Netball is going to be moved venue for the Birmingham Commonwealth Games because it proved very popular at the World Cup. And then we also have news that the FIFA Women's World Cup race, 2 countries have dropped out of that, so that's becoming even closer competition. And then I'll probably run through some performances that have impressed me over the week as well. And then I think we're also going to talk about the Aurora Games, which is quite an interesting concept. So.
All right, well, that's quite a lineup, as you said. That Jamaican athlete Brianna Williams, she tested positive to taking hydrochlorothiazide, which, as many people know, is a diuretic. I actually take it on a daily basis, but it's banned from athletics. So tell us a little bit more about that story.
Yeah, so it's like you said, it's in cold and flu medication. So she's essentially argued that she was given it to her by a relative. And then she had declared it as well when she went for her test. It sounded like she did realise that it was banned and then declared it as well. But she was banned in June at the Jamaican Championships, which is it makes a lot of sense now because she was meant to perform at the Pan American Games in August, and it was quite exciting that she was going to perform there because she's this big up and coming talent, and people kind of expected maybe for her to get some of her first senior medals, but she kind of didn't compete at all, and the excuse at the time is that they were resting her for the World Championships, which it seemed a bit odd that she was because she'd had this positive doping test. But she wants to kind of have a hearing quite quickly because obviously the World Championships start in a few weeks' time. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. I mean, I feel like she's going to face a ban because she's tested positive no matter what, but I don't know if you saw the Christian Coleman, the American sprinter.
Yes. So, yes, she's, of course, a teenager still, isn't she? She was the current under-20 champion in the 100 and 200 metres. So she's somebody who's going to be a rock star for the future if she can get past this.
Yeah, so she's only 17 years old. And she is really young, but I do think people kind of expecting her to, for the next 10 years at least, be the next star in women's athletics at least, because there's not really that many people, especially in the 100 and 200 meters, that are young talent. So like you said, if she does get past it, she could dominate for a very long time. But obviously that's a big but, because she could be facing a ban of maybe 2 years, potentially even 4 years. So we'll have to see what happens. But I think it's a shame with the Olympics next year, because it would have been really good to see her at the Olympics.
Yeah, that would be devastating, and I believe her hearing is actually on the September 4th. So when the show goes out, so we'll get some news of that for next week's show. Now, netball, of course, which seems to be taking over the world, that's got some news where it's going to be actually changing the venue for the Commonwealth Games. What have you heard about that?
So it was originally meant to be at the Coventry Indoor Arena. So for people that don't know, Coventry is kind of another city next to Birmingham, so it wouldn't have been in the main city that's hosting the Commonwealth, which is quite a big venue really in England, and that's going to be 50% more capacity for each session. I think that comes off the back of Liverpool hosting the World Cup, because that was just so popular. Basically every session sold out. A lot of tickets were sold, so it showed, at least in England, that there is an appetite for netballers and for people going along to watch netball. But I think that's just really good news, especially for the sport as well, because they're not at the Olympics. So I'd say the Commonwealth Games is probably the biggest stage it's played at. And to get a bigger audience for that, I think, is really good news for the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, moving on to soccer real quick here. Of course, the FIFA Women's World Cup this year was such a huge success, and they're talking about adding teams next year, which we've discussed on another show, about adding more teams here. But there's been a little bit of a change in the bidding race now. I think that news broke today or yesterday, didn't it? And we've got 8 teams there: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Colombia, Japan, New Zealand, South Africa and South Korea. I hear that the South Korea bid could be combined with the North Korea bid. So we're down to 8 options here.
Yeah, so Belgium and Bolivia dropped out. I think there's questions over whether Belgium even wanted to host it. Kind of said they weren't even that interested, but Bolivia have dropped out, which I don't think is that surprising. I'd heard that if they were going to go for it, they probably would have hijacked onto one of the other South American countries. So I presume maybe what's happened there is that Argentina or Colombia or Brazil, didn't want that to happen. So Bolivia have kind of just dropped out because they couldn't really do it off their own back. So we've got 8 left. It's a really interesting, countries from all over, 3 South American, and then New Zealand, Australia, and then Japan and South Korea, which I think, I'd say for me, I think Australia probably are favourites, maybe. So that's going to be just a very, I think, interesting. I think each country has different, there's different benefits to hosting it in every country. So that should be really exciting to see how that turns out.
Yeah, and we'll know the chosen one next spring, won't we? I think May, isn't it, when they make the announcement? In
May, yeah. So it won't be too long. So I think we have December the 13th. I think that's when bids are submitted. And I think that will be when the final countries are decided. And it will be interesting, like you said, the South Korea, North Korea joint bid, whether that actually comes to fruition, because I feel like North Korea kind of jumping on that will potentially weaken South Korea's bid, because I feel like it complicates the situation a lot more. So I think for me, that's what I'm going to be definitely looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's another story that talk about a growing sport, and that's stand-up paddleboarding. It's become increasingly popular, but the governing bodies are squabbling over who wants to take ownership of it in terms of, governing the sport. And you covered a story with a little bit more squabbling going on in that camp.
Over who owns the stand-up paddle discipline. And I think at the moment surfing have the majority of the power, because the Canoe Federation have been trying to host their own World Championships for a while now. And they've got one coming up in October, so next month. And they've essentially kind of they've created this promotional video, and it's quite obvious that the footage in that promotional video previously was used in the ISA's own promotional video from their own World Championships. So essentially the ICF have taken footage from the ISA. So it's a kind of another twist in the tail, really. I know the hearing is going to be next month as well to determine who owns stand-up paddle. So I think this could be quite the ISA surfing will be happy with this, because I think it doesn't look great for canoeing that they've essentially just kind of taken someone else's footage and used it for their own. But it's an odd story, really. It's very strange that they've even kind of done it.
It is an odd story, and these governing bodies don't always get it right, as we've heard in boxing, which is something we'll cover on another week, bring everybody up to date with what's happening in boxing, as it pertains, of course, to Tokyo next year. But moving on now to a completely different kind of games. And as you said, it's an interesting concept, the Aurora Games, and it happened last month over here in the States. What did you learn about this? I mean, how much have you been involved in covering this? Because I don't think it was covered on Inside the Games, but you've become well aware of it.
No, yeah, we haven't covered it on Inside the Games, really, which I kind of maybe suggests how it's gone down, really, because we do cover most things, and if we're not covering it, potentially maybe it hasn't got the attention that it's wanted. I've kind of more seen just bits of it on Twitter and kind of opinion stories on it, because I think there's a lot of mixed emotion. So it's essentially just an all-female sport competition. It's called an entertainment competition, which is quite an interesting way to describe it. But so it was sports like tennis, gymnastics, basketball, ice hockey, figure skating, beach volleyball, and table tennis. And I think it went down quite well in terms of the women that competed in it were quite well paid, and they, the attention was on them. But then I've also seen a lot of criticism where certain things, I think there was something like gymnastics, a lot of the equipment was damp because of condensation. I think something similar happened in basketball. And then I've also seen criticism that a lot of the sports are quite feminine, typically feminine. So they've kind of picked, the classically like feminine sports and just, put those on the program rather than having a whole range of sports. So it's kind of almost self-perpetuating almost. But I think it's just quite an interesting event to run, because obviously there's a lot of focus on women's sport at the moment, and to have an event that's all, or kind of all female athletes, it's interesting to see kind of the attention that it brings and the interest it brings to see where we can go in the future. So whether we'll see it again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how often it's meant to be run. I think something maybe like every 2 years or something like that. But yeah, it was different. So at least there was that, if anything.
It certainly was different, but they did include ice hockey, which is, some may say, not quite as feminine, but I take your point on the others. And they have quite an impressive lineup on their advisory board, too, of leading athletes like Chris Evert, Monica Seles, Nancy Kerrigan, Shannon Miller, Jackie Joyner-Kersig, and Judy Murray, and a lot more, including a WiSP Sports ambassador, I might add, Marty Malloy, the judoka. She's on there. So it's quite an impressive lineup. So I guess we'll just see. It may generate sponsorship dollars because it's entertainment as well as sport, because that combination might be what they're after, to try and get more the general public interested in the sport where they maybe otherwise wouldn't have watched it. So we'll follow that one.
I think I saw with the ice hockey as well, because I know that the Canadian and American women's ice hockey, they're having some problems in terms of being paid appropriately at all. And I know for that tournament they were paid properly, and they had travel, accommodation, meals, all of that sorted. So I mean, in terms of kind of being given a platform, but then also treated with respect and fairly, I think is important. So it wasn't kind of all show as well, which I think was really good. And hopefully it will set kind of a standard for future events in the future as well.
Absolutely. Well, we'll keep following that on here on the WiSP Sports Desk. And finally, a quick roundup of the teams and individuals that you've been watching that have performed well and caught your attention over the past week there, Nancy. Yeah.
Well, there was a rhythmic gymnast actually, which is quite an interesting sport for me to take an interest in, because it's not normally my thing. But there's a Russian gymnast called Dina Averina, and for the past few months, she has constantly popped up, because I was at the European Games and she won, I think, four gold medals there. So she's been taking part in a Gymnastics Challenge Cup event in Kazan, and she won the individual all around, and then also 3 other gold medals in each separate event. And I think she's just going to be one in Tokyo that essentially wins everything, because she kind of hit form in 2017, so straight after Rio. So she wasn't at Rio, but since then has essentially basically won everything. So she's again been impressive this week. And then I think the volleyball as well, we've had Serbia they're defending champions in the European Volleyball Championships, and they've just been, every match they've played so far, they've just kind of obliterated their opponents. So they've into the quarterfinals, which are taking place tomorrow. So I'm kind of expecting them to continue as well. So I think they've been the two, Dina Averina and the Serbian women's volleyball team, have been impressive this week. Okay.
Well, I have to mention equestrian sport, of course, because we've just had the European Championships for show jumping, dressage, and this past weekend for eventing. And Ingrid Klimke, German eventer, won back-to-back again. She defended her title as a European champion and was absolutely fantastic. She rides Hale Bob, of course, who she was at the World Equestrian Games last year with, and she won the title with 2 years ago. So she's one of the few riders to win back-to-back on the same horse. And a week before that, her compatriot Isabel Worth won the individual dressage title, again, the European Championship. Again, she's won it 3 times, and she's, I think, got about 14 European medals to her name. That's not counting, of course, all the other medals that she's won. Germany did really well in terms of the dressage and the eventing, because they won the team in the eventing as well. But the dressage podium in Rotterdam 2 weeks ago had all women on taking individual dressage medals, which was great to see. So
yeah, that is really good.
Yeah, and they are pretty dominant in dressage, but at the same time, there are other nations catching up with them, like Great Britain, who didn't have a good week there, unfortunately. But yeah, it was an exciting time, great sport in all 3 disciplines, and that was, of course, a final qualifier for many of them that didn't make it to get their ticket to Tokyo. That was a chance to do so, just like the Pan Ams. But lots happening. As we said, we're going to be coming back next week, every week, right here, when we can pin Nancy down on her world travels. Where are you off to next, Nancy?
Oh, I'm actually going to Russia so I'm going for the men's boxing world championships, and then I'll be going to the women's off as well in October. So that will be a really fun trip.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll talk about that next week on the show. But in the meantime, do subscribe on WiSP Sports, wherever you listen to your podcasts, or you can find us online at wispsports.com and insidethegames.biz. Insidethegames.biz, that's where Nancy does all her writing, and we will get her back here to bring us up to date with what's happening in the world of women's sports every week here on the WiSP Sports Desk. Nancy, great to catch up with you. Safe travels. We'll talk to you next week.
Yep, thank you for having me. It was really enjoyable.